In this lecture on theology of African hospitality, I want to dwell on what it is, how African hospitality has been abused during the era of slave trade, slavery, neocolonialism via corruption. But more importantly is to understand what theology of African hospitality is all about. So in this lecture, a theology of African hospitality is seen as a build-up of African theology of reconstruction. And in this lecture, theology of African hospitality comes in the 21st century amidst xenophobia in South Africa, ethnic balkanizations, electioneering based on ethnic royalties, massive corruption across Africa, corruption that robs the weak, the disabled, and other needy people in society. And this theology of African hospitality finds itself at home in Africa's Ubuntu or humane indigenous cultures and philosophies of care and concern for the other, and the biblical traditions of hospitality. It has been abused historically through slavery, as I've noted, slave trade, colonialism, dictatorships, corruption, neocolonialism, and in some elements of globalization. African hospitality itself can literally be defined as that extension of generosity, giving freely without strings attached. In other words, it is an unconditional readiness to share socially, religious-wise, share politically, economically, share food, share drink. All that broadly is all about what African hospitality itself is all about. And in this lecture, we consider it as compatible to Christ's hospitality. Christ's hospitable deeds really manifest themselves throughout the Bible. And of course, wherever an African is, he goes or she goes with his or her hospitality. Whenever an African is, there is hospitality. Of course, the so-called modernity has abused it, or it has been abused as people wrestle with new cultures that have come to Africa. And it appears like we have to recall the ancient hospitality that was totally compatible with the gospel of Christ. Hence, you can say that African hospitality itself, the hospitality itself is the willingness to help, to give, to assist, to love, to carry one another's burden without necessarily putting profit or rewards as a driving force. And it finds its biblical parallelism in Romans 15 verse 7, where St. Paul says, welcome one another, just as Christ has welcomed you. Just as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God, welcome one another. Further, St. Paul in Galatians 6:2 urges his audience to carry each other's burdens, and in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Hence, if you look at now the so-called Christ hospitality and the so-called African hospitality, together they build up theology of African hospitality. And it is possible that theology of African hospitality will change the world, can change the world, because the unique African hospitality is really something Africa can bequeath the entire world. African hospitality is a vital aspect of existence in Africa in general, and is one of the few facets of ancient African culture that is still practiced today by most Africans, in spite of all the forces of recent external influence or even internal pressure. And in many ways, one may argue that despite the destabilization of traditional life by colonialism, foreign worldviews, technology, and modern living, African hospitality has held rather well, to the extent that it can be described as the way of being an African. Being an African is a dearly hospitable. To be an African is to be hospitable. Of course, a lot has happened throughout the centuries, and the Africans who are coming, even strangers, guests, people of no known background, they are becoming suspicious, maybe because of terrorism, COVID-19, HIV/AIDS, and other things that are making people suspicious of one another. But the brand of hospitality, the causing brand of hospitality, is here in Africa. Equally, Christ's insistence that you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. John 15. This shows that there is a huge spiritual hospitality that Christ extended to humanity. And this hospitality reverberates across the centuries. Now, another thing that is very critical is interdependence and African hospitality. As above implied in the ongoing discussion here, African hospitality is grounded on the fact that no one is an island of himself or herself. Rather, each and every one of us is part of the whole. John Beatty summarizes African philosophy when he says, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. That's a summary also which summarizes African hospitality, because African hospitality is built on I am because we are, not I am because I exist. Like René Descartes, French philosopher, who said I exist because I am, or I am because, the I am here in African hospitality goes with we are, not emphasizing on I am. That communalistic aspect is very clear in Pauline theology, where St. Paul insists on the need to recognize other people's gifts, talents, specialties, all this in order to edify the society and the church in particular. You look at Ephesians 4:10 to 12, or even 1 Corinthians chapter 12, you find he says, it is he who built some to be prophets, some to be this, some others to be this. All these teams are to build one another and to build the body of Christ. Now, many African proverbs will express this communalistic approach found in the Bible and even in ancient African hospitality. Take one, mugogo omwe dwaraga irioko, meaning one log does not make a bridge. You cannot make a bridge using one log. You need many. Even a house is not built. Is not built. A house is not built with the one stone. You have to get so many blocks of stones to build a house. So it's all about we need one another. This other block needs the other. The wall needs the floor. The roof needs the wall to make a house. That is the message of Pauline theology and even in Christology. Now, the Proverbs on one rock does not make a bridge means that an individual cannot do something that is substantial. One person cannot man his own machinery that makes real impact to society and even to God. One needs others for advice, for rebuke, for correction, for critique, for teaching, for training, and other things. Now, since bridges help people to cross over the river and do business such as trading and general interactions, one rock or one person cannot, without teaming up with the rest, ensure the continuity of the members of the community. For by relying on him or herself, the people may starve or be separated for lack of good bridge to make them pass over the vicissitudes of life. Thus, one cannot advise himself or herself, nor rebuke, or correct his own wrongs, or, say, judge himself fairly. For a rock needs other rocks to combine and make a firm bridge to ensure safety as we cross over the valleys of life together. Of course, there is one critical proverb that can also help us understand African hospitality, and of course we relate it to the biblical traditions, which says, "Gotire gitatoirie kenge." There is nothing that does not depend on another one. Literally, it says all things are interdependent. Now, the original translation should have been, "No one can dare live without support from another person. His success cannot be assured." It means that in society of men and women, everyone's contribution, every person's contribution is important and necessary. It agrees with St. Paul when he says, "He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be pastors, some to be teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ." That is Ephesians 4, verses 10 to 14. Now, of course, we also need to engage ourselves in various activities. And these activities may require us to ask or to perform several tasks. First, we need to demonstrate the major forms of social religious manifestations of African hospitality that are compatible to the gospel of Christ. Of course, African hospitality manifests itself economically, through industries, socially through interaction, economically, of course, I've said through industries, politically through matters to do with governance, appointment of other maki or leaders in African society. And of course, there is the spiritual dimension, where we remain notoriously religious, as John Beatty once said, reputably religious. In everything we do, whether we are doing economic things, religion becomes a prefect of economic dimension, the social dimension, the political dimension. We do it for God. Another activity is to show how African hospitality has been abused across the centuries. And I've hinted it already that colonialism, slavery, slave trade, our own ethnic balkanizations, they all abuse our hospitality. And xenophobia has come. We've been hearing in South Africa, xenophobia taking people to the levels that we don't want to imagine. In Rwanda in 1984, we heard in 1984 about the genocide that took away almost 1 million people. Idi Amin era, we had so many people dying, so many things. Okay, a third activity is to demonstrate the uniqueness of African hospitality and compare it with Christ's hospitality as we understand it. The last activity is to compare our own African proverbs and biblical verses that deal with the concept of hospitality and assess how it can aid contemporary society. As we think of Millennium Development Goals, and now we have Sustainable Development Goals, we need to ask ourselves, where is African hospitality or theology of African hospitality going to help us? How will it help us? Certainly it will. We need to think about it. Thank you.